Hi friends, today we're going to continue learning about pictographs, specifically scaled pictographs, and we talked a little bit about what that means yesterday. So when you hear the word pictograph, it sounds like pictures or pictographs, and that's because we use pictures to represent our information. The word scaled, we talked about that yesterday as well, and scaled means that you're not counting by ones, you're actually counting by a different number. So let's quickly review the parts of a pictograph, starting with the very top, and this is the title. The title tells us what kind of information we're looking at. So in this case, we're looking at the favorite types of games. And then over here, it lists our different types of games. So they've done puzzles, card games, and board games for this specific graph. Down here is the most important part of a pictograph. And the reason why it's so important, the key is so important, is because it tells us what each picture stands for. It tells you what you're going to be counting by. So this is a picture that we're going to be using, and this tells me what I'm skip counting by. So for every little chess piece or game piece, it's actually going to stand for 4 students instead of just 1. And that's important to know and important to look at, because if I didn't look at that and I just counted this, I would have thought that maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 students picked puzzles. But really that's not true because it's counting by 4s. So I like to go ahead and find out the number and write the number over to the side before I get started. Kind of gets all the hard work done before I start problem solving, and it gives me a better idea of how many students actually picked each thing. We talked yesterday about 2 different ways that you could figure this out. I'm going to show you one way first, and the first way is repeated addition or skip counting. So if you're really good at skip counting by 4s, you could skip count by 4s and say 4, 8, 12, 16, 20. If you're not, you could also write down 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4, because you're trying to figure out the total here. The other strategy that we talked about yesterday was how you can actually use multiplication. And when you're using multiplication, you can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You count how many pieces you have or pictures you have, and you multiply it by what you're counting by, because that keyword each tells me I'm multiplying. So I've got 5 times 4, and that's a lot easier for me to do than skip counting by 4s. When I do 5 times 4, I know that if I do 5 times 2, that's 10, and if I double that, that gives me 20. So as far as puzzles go, 20 people said that that's their favorite game. Let's take a look down here, because this is a little different. If you look here, I've got chess pieces, but then I also have a piece that looks a little strange. We call that a half piece. And we use half pieces when we're using scaled pictographs to show that we don't really want to count by this number. We want it to mean half of its number. So I like to count the full ones first, then I'll look at the half. So I've got 4, 4, and 4. So I have 4 plus 4 plus 4. And again, you could do 4, because that's what your key is, times how many pieces you have. And I know 4 plus 4 or 4 plus 4 plus 4 or 4 times 3 is 12. But that's not really how many students picked this particular game, because I still have to count this piece here. And that's a half piece. Now, whenever I'm trying to figure out how much a half piece is, I have to look down here, which is 4, and I have to split it in half. There's a couple different ways that you can do this. One way that I like to do it is by taking my circles like this, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I like to find the middle or cut it in half. If I take 4 and I cut it in half, here's half, I have 2 pieces on this side and 2 pieces on this side. That's one way you can do it. You could also just divide by 2. Because if you have 4 and you cut something into half, think of like a sandwich. If I have a sandwich and I cut my sandwich in half, I have 2 pieces. So if I want to cut 4 in half, I'm going to have 2 pieces. And if I draw a picture of what this looks like, I've got 4 divided by 2, so 1, 2. 1, 2, and that gives me 2 groups. So I know that each half piece actually stands for 2 people. So I did figure out 4 plus 4 plus 4, and that equals 12. But I need to add this half piece here. So I already have 12, and I just found out that half of 4, if I cut 4 in half, that gives me 2. So really, 14 people picked card games as their favorite game. The last one I need to figure out is board games. And taking a look ahead here, I noticed that there aren't any half pieces, so I'm just going to be counting on or multiplying. So I'm going to go ahead and clear this off so that we have a little bit more space here. Thank you for being patient. And now let's go ahead and take a look at this. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pieces here. Remember, we're not going to write 6 because our key says that we're counting by 4. So you can choose to do 4 plus 4 plus 4. And I'm going to keep doing it until I get to 6 pieces because I'm repeatedly adding 1, 2, 3, 4 plus 4 plus 4. Or since it says each, we can multiply. So we can take 4, our key, and multiply it by how many pieces we have, which is 6. And if you don't know your facts, you can remember to draw a picture of this. So if I have 4 circles and I put 6 in each one and I count them up at the end, that would give me, that would give me 24. So 24 students picked board games. So now I've done all my math and now I know how many people picked each one. That way I don't get confused with my key and the pieces. So I'm going to clear this off again so that we have a little bit more space. And now we can take a look at some questions here. It says, how many students chose puzzles? So when I go to puzzles, I want to look at how many students actually picked them. And I'm not going to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people because, again, each piece stands for 4. So I'm going to look right here and I see that 20 people actually picked puzzles. And I got that by taking my key and multiplying it by the number of pieces that were there. The next one says, how many fewer tells me I'm subtracting, how many fewer students chose card games than board games? And we talked yesterday about how even if there's not a number there, we do already have a number for card games. And card games has 14 and board games has 24. And when I want to know how many fewer people chose this than this, I can see that fewer people did choose that. So now I need to kind of look and see how many less actually did that. We said fewer means subtracting. So when I subtract, I have to put the biggest number on the top. So I'm going to do 24 minus 14, and 4 minus 4 is 0. 2 minus 1 is 1. So 10 students fewer for card games than board games. You can also use the graph to help you. You can see that there was 1 piece, 2 pieces missing. So 2 times 4, that gives you 8. And then you need another half piece to complete that. And we said half is 2. So if you do 8 plus 2, that would give you 10. So either way you do it, you're going to get the same answer. Just going to kind of clear that off so that there's no space there. Okay. How many more? How many more? We said yesterday how many more means that you're subtracting. So how many more students chose board games than puzzles? And again, even though they're just names, we do have numbers that go with them. So if I take a look at board games has 24. Puzzles has 20. So if I think of how many more, biggest number goes on top. So 24 minus 20. There's more on the top, no need to stop. So 4 minus 0 is 4. 2 minus 2 is 0, so I can leave that blank. So there were 4 more students that chose board games than puzzles. I can also look at my pictograph here and see like how they're all lined up there, except for 1 piece here. So I don't say that that's 1 student because each piece stands for 4. So I would take that 1 piece and look at my key, which is 4, and know that that is actually 4 people. And again, I get the same answer either way. Let's look at the next one. It says, how many students were surveyed? We said yesterday that a survey means you're being asked a question and people are collecting information. Now, when we're thinking of how many students were surveyed, that means how many people in all were asked. Now, whether they picked puzzles, card games, or board games, they were still asked the same question. So if I want to know how many people were surveyed, I actually have to look at everybody that was asked. So I have 20 people that were asked and they picked puzzles, 14 people that were asked and they picked card games, and then I had 24 people that were asked and they picked board games. If I add that up, I've got 8 over here. 2 plus 1 is 3, plus 2 more is 5. So 58 students were asked or surveyed for their favorite game. The next one says, how many students did not, that's kind of important, did not choose card games? So if they chose card games, I'm not going to look at them because it's asking me how many students didn't pick card games. So I know puzzles is not card games. They picked something else. And board games is also picking something else. So I need to know how many people is that. So I'm going to clear this so we have a little bit more space over next to the problem. I'm going to take my 20 for my puzzles because those are not card games. And I'm going to take my 24 for my board games and add them up to find out how many students didn't pick card games. So 0 plus 4, 4, and then 2 plus 2 is 4. So 44 students out of the 58 did not pick card games. That means they picked something else. The last one I want to show you and kind of talk about is an error analysis question. And when you're looking at this, you're trying to find the mistake that someone made. So I'm going to clear this off just so that there's a little bit more space there. And that was a 20, so I'm going to rewrite that. It says, what's the error? So we're trying to find out the mistake. An error is a mistake. So Jacob said that one more student chose board games than puzzles. Explain his error. So I'm looking at board games and puzzles again, and I see that that's the same, that's the same, that's the same, that's the same, that's the same. Okay, this one does have another piece more. So Jacob is saying that one more student chose board games. What mistake did he make? Well, when I look at this, I do see that there is one piece missing. So yes, there is one piece that is missing from board games and puzzles. But what Jacob said is that he said one more student, not one more piece. And if I look at my key, I know that each piece actually stands for 4. So each piece equals 4 students. So if they're one piece short up here, it actually means that it should be 4 students and not just a single student. So Jacob's mistake is that he just looked at the pieces. I think Jacob forgot to look at his key. So Jacob, he forgot to look at that because if he would have looked, he would have seen that this is actually 4 and not 1. So Jacob forgot to look at his key and see just what we talked about up here, that each piece is actually 4 students and not a single student. Today, you're going to practice using scaled pictographs, and you're going to notice that some of your answer choices in your surveys or in your pictograph over here are going to include half pieces. Remember to always look at your key because that's going to tell you what you're counting by. And also, if you have a half piece, remember to cut your key down here in half for that piece.